Hi, my name's Caleb from ithinkbiblically.com, and in this video we're going to look at the Muslim claim that Muhammad is mentioned and described in Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 18, where God says he will send a prophet like Moses. Muslims claim that Deuteronomy 18 is proof that Muhammad was prophesied about because he is a prophet like Moses, and the text says that he will come from the brethren of Israel, and since Muhammad is descended from Ishmael, therefore he is Israel's brother, and therefore he is the prophet prophesied about in Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 18. I want to examine this claim in detail, but I want to begin by reading from verse 15 of chapter 18. So let's read first of all from verse 15, and we're going to also read verse 16. The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brethren. You must listen to him. For this is what you asked of the Lord your God at Horeb on the day of the assembly, when you said, "Let us not hear the voice of the Lord our God, nor see this great fire any more, or we will die." Verse 16 makes it very clear that what is meant by a prophet like Moses is a prophet that speaks directly to God. The people of Israel were afraid when God spoke to them and gave them the Ten Commandments at Mount Horeb. They were afraid and fearful of God's voice and of the fire, and they said to Moses, "You speak to God for us," because they didn't want to hear from God anymore because of their fear of God. And so very clearly here, Moses spoke directly to God and brought the revelation to the people from there on. Now, if we look in the Quran, we will find that Muhammad did not speak directly to God. In fact, the Quran says only Moses spoke directly to God. Let's look in Sura chapter 4. Surah chapter 4, verse 163. Verily we have sent the revelation to you, Muhammad, as we sent the revelation to Noah and to the prophets after him. We also sent the revelation to Abraham, to Ishmael, Isaac, Jacob, and the offspring of the 12 sons of Jacob. Jesus, Job, Jonah, Aaron, Solomon, and David we gave the Psalms, and the messengers we have mentioned to you before, and the messengers we have not mentioned to you. And to Moses, God spoke directly. So the Quran makes it very clear that Muhammad did not speak directly to God. Rather, the revelation was sent down to him, but Moses spoke directly to God. Now, Muslims will try to argue at this point that in the hadiths there are stories where Muhammad went up to heaven and spoke directly to Allah, and this is where you get the Muslim prayer from. However, these stories come hundreds of years after Muhammad died. We have very little evidence for them. In fact, the oldest manuscript for it is in 1000 AD, over 350 years after his death. So these traditions are extremely unreliable when it comes to Muhammad and his experiences with God, if you can believe them at all. However, the Quran overrides the hadiths and makes it very clear that the revelation was supposedly sent down to Muhammad, but that God spoke directly to Moses. Now, we as Christians believe that Jesus spoke directly to God. So we can see that Jesus fits this description as a prophet like Moses. Now, Muslims will try to argue, what about all these other characteristics that Muhammad had that were similar to Moses? However, in the context of the passage, there's only one characteristic that matters, and that is the fact that Moses spoke directly to God. So that rules out Muhammad, but we can see that Jesus fits the criteria. The next point I want to make is that the passage is very clear in verse 15 that the prophet must come from among the people of Israel. It uses the Hebrew word kereb. If we look very closely, in Deuteronomy chapter 15, we can see that the word translated among you is kereb, which means your inner parts, your inner organs, or from your midst. So the prophet must come from the midst of Israel. This is a point that stumped Muslim apologist Adnan Rashid when I debated with him at Speaker's Corner. he just couldn't get around this word.
Kerub.
Okay,
So the definition of
sorry,
kerub,
not akraba.
the definition of kerub is midst or inward parts. It refers even to your inner organs.
Okay.
Right? So when he says
And-
in the midst of thee, he's talking to the Israelites and he's saying the prophet will come from in your midst.
Okay. No, that okay.
Inner parts.
And other meanings. Can you read other meanings? Among, body.
I'll give you another dictionary.
Wait.
Which one?
Devoured, entrails, heart, herself, inner thought,
inner.
inside,
Yeah.
inward
Yeah.
feelings, inward part,
right.
inward thought, inwardly,
So the
middle,
general
midst,
meaning is
within
you,
within
the
our
Israelites.
land, within their land. Okay, go down, please. Okay,
This is another dictionary. another
okay.
Hebrew
Which is
dictionary.
what does it say? Sorry.
Inward part, midst.
Okay,
Yeah.
and keep going.
Inward parts of the human body. So the
Okay.
context, the
The
real
way-
meaning is within you.
Okay.
Within you, the
The
Israelites
word-
that he's speaking to.
Are you aware that Arabic and Hebrew are sister
Yeah,
languages?
honestly, I'm just going to go by dictionary. I'm not going to go by Arabic or your knowledge
Okay,
of
I
Arabic.
can get.
Now, Adnan Rashid tried to argue that in Arabic there was another word, koreb, that meant close or near, and since Semitic languages are similar, this should be applied to the passage. However, in Hebrew there is also another word called koreb, which means close or near and can refer to relatives, but that is not the word used in this passage. The word used in this passage is kereb, which means in your midst or your inner parts. So therefore Muhammad is ruled out automatically. So we have two reasons so far. We see first of all that Muhammad is not a prophet like Moses in the context of the passage. And we see also that Muhammad does not come from the midst of the people of Israel. However, Jesus fits both criteria. He comes from the midst of Israel and he speaks directly to God. So let's move on to the next point that Muslims try to argue, and that is that the word brethren must refer to Ishmael, who is the brother of Isaac. There's a big glaring problem here. Ishmael is not the brother of Israel. Ishmael is the brother of Isaac, and he is actually Israel's uncle. So therefore he is eliminated again as a person who could fit this description. We know that Israel was the name given to Jacob, and Jacob had 12 sons. And these 12 sons make up the 12 tribes of Israel. And if we look in Deuteronomy chapter 17, just the chapter earlier, verse 15, it says, "Be sure to appoint over you a king the Lord your God chooses. He must be from among your brethren. Do not place a foreigner over you, one who is not an Israelite." So we can see from the text there that the word brethren applies to the 12 tribes of Israel. Very clear that that word brethren is the same in Deuteronomy chapter 17 verse 15 as the one in Deuteronomy chapter 18 verse 15 and 18. So the word brethren applies to the 12 tribes of Israel. So again, Muhammad is eliminated. But we know that Jesus came from the 12 tribes of Israel. He came from the tribe of Judah. So we can see very clearly that Muhammad does not fit the description that is given in Deuteronomy chapter 18. But not only that, we can see very clearly that Muhammad does not fit the description because he gave a false prophecy. And we're going to get into that in a minute. But if we look in Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 20, "But the prophet who presumes to speak in my name anything I have not commanded, or a prophet who speaks in the name of other gods, is to be put to death." So it's very clear here in this verse that if a prophet speaks presumptuously, says something that God did not give him to say, then that prophet must be put to death. Now, Muslims hate the earliest biographies of Muhammad. This is the earliest biography of Muhammad. It's the life of Muhammad by Ibn Ishaq, a Muslim who was a devout Muslim. And he wrote a biography of Muhammad. And in there on page 166, Muhammad spoke verses which were actually from Satan, claiming that they were from God. And later he recanted them. What's interesting is that when he gave these satanic verses, The other Muslims around him bowed down to the ground, proving that they could not tell the difference between Muhammad's normal supposed revelations and the revelations from Satan. Muslims hate the earliest biography of Muhammad and they will try to deny it as much as they can. But this is the closest source we have to the life of Muhammad in the whole world. And there in that passage, Muhammad spoke presumptuously, and therefore he is not a prophet of God, according to Deuteronomy chapter 18, verse 20. But it goes on in verse 21, and it says this, "You may say to yourselves, how can we know when a message has not been spoken by the Lord? If what a prophet proclaims in the name of the Lord does not take place or come true, that is a message the Lord has not spoken. That prophet has spoken presumptuously, so do not be afraid of him." I've already made a video on Muhammad's false end times prophecies, where Muhammad very clearly prophesied that the end of the world, the coming of the Antichrist and the return of Jesus Christ would all take place at the conquest of Constantinople, the Roman city that was destroyed hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So therefore Muhammad is a false prophet that falsely predicted the future, and so therefore we as Christians or anyone else in this world should not be afraid of him because he has spoken presumptuously in the name of the Lord. So we can see very clearly that Muhammad fails the first test of being a prophet like Moses. Why? Because what it means is a prophet that speaks directly to God, and Muhammad did not speak directly to God. He also fails the test because he was not from the midst of the people of Israel. He also fails the test because he was not Israel's brethren, one of the 12 tribes of Israel. He fails the test because he spoke presumptuously in the name of God by giving satanic verses. And he also fails the test because he gave false prophecies about the future that did not come to pass when they should have. So we can know categorically that Muhammad was a false prophet. But when it comes to Jesus, we can see that Jesus spoke directly to God, that he came from the midst of the people of Israel, that he came from one of the brethren of Israel. In fact, he came from the tribe of Judah. We know also that he spoke only that which the Father gave him to speak. And we know that he spoke the future because he prophesied the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So we can know that Jesus fits the description of the prophet like Moses, and Muhammad does not. Muhammad was a false prophet that should be rejected, and I hope that you too reject him and come to Christianity, the true religion and the only path to God.